Sexism, the discrimination against an individual, solely based on their sex and/or gender. This discrimination can be exemplified through biased treatment, microaggressions, and in some cases, violence. We asked around campus to see if any CSUMB students have ever been affected by sexism. These were their responses.
I, up to this point, have not experienced sexism.
I don't believe I have.
I have. I've experienced it in the workplace. I've experienced it in my junior college. I have not experienced it on the CSUMB campus so far.
Since the responses were mixed, we decided to get a professional's opinion. Here is a licensed psychologist's view on sexism in college campuses.
Well, I'll speak of just in general, right, in terms of sexism. I think in higher education, it can be displayed in many different ways in terms of our faculty, our staff, and our students. I think in terms of school, and this is more general speaking, it sometimes becomes more obvious in classes, like in the STEM fields. If you look around, what is it that we just visibly see in terms of who's taking computer science or who's in the biology courses, who's in physics. And I think that's also parallel to the CSUMB experience. I don't have the exact numbers, so I can't say that, but I think that there is a parallel of just generally in higher education. And then if we look at, the CSUMB as a microcosm.
In fact, in one recent study, it was discovered that when women were faced with protective paternalism in their STEM courses, they were more likely to perform poorly in those classes. We decided to ask the CSUMB students whether they had noticed any signs of sexism in their classes. This was what they had to say.
There could be an imbalance in male to female ratio. You might be triggered to think that you might not make it, or why are there not so many people like me, or females are not cut out for this field. I feel as a psychology major that there's a pretty well balance of men and women in the classes. But I have dealt with it on a personal level.
Acknowledging the fact that there are students who have experienced sexism before, it is important to understand the possible effects that sexism can have on one's mental health. Dr. Mejia provided us with some insight on this topic.
Sexism could be very analogous to racism, to heterosexism, right? And so when we look at those experiences, because we're part of a community or membership of a community, and we experience any form of discrimination, prejudice, harassment, invalidation, or violence, that is going to have an effect on our mental health. Common effects could be depression, could be anxiety, would be some examples of that. If we have experiences of depression and anxiety, that can affect our ability to learn and to persist here academically.
Now knowing that sexism can actually have a negative effect on one's mental health, we wanted to know how some students would actually deal with sexism. This was their advice for coping with the sexist encounter.
I think I would just try and be the best version of myself.
I would talk to a professional about it. I know that they could give you advice in order to handle the situation.
When I was younger, I ignored it and just kind of internalized it. As I've gotten older, I have learned to confront the person who's being sexist.
Another recent study discovered that when women have a stronger belief in the equality of the genders, they were more likely to confront a sexist individual. However, other studies discovered that a large amount of women would actually prefer not to confront a sexist individual, but instead, they would rather cope with the sexism internally. But don't ever feel like you need to cope alone. Dr. Mejia has provided us with a list of resources that can help us all deal with the harms of sexism.
So I think some of the resources, obviously, mental health. I think that sexism does have an impact on mental health. And we also have a Title IX coordinator, Whitney Smith. We have an Office of Inclusivity, and so that's a resource for students. And I think with Title IX, part of being on campus and any college campus is that we want to have a safe space for everyone that's free of discrimination, free of harassment, and we have, the idea that we have all the right to be here and learn. And so having that office as a resource in terms of just the legal support, if that support is needed, is available. And then of course mental health. So having the Personal Growth Counseling Center as a confidential space where students can come in who have been impacted and gain support. So those are two resources.
But as a part of the CSUMB community, it is up to us all to make sure that no one has to deal with the harms of sexism. It is our duty to maintain a safe and inclusive environment for all individuals, regardless of their sex or their gender.